Hi everybody, Nyron Brick here, co-founder and CEO of Lithero, again with another video from Lithero. This time we've got a special guest, great friend and colleague of mine here at Lithero, Eleanor Young. I'll let her introduce herself, but I'll introduce our topic for today, which is we're going to actually be talking about, is AI the end of human creativity? Dun dun dun, the robots are coming for your job, right? Hide your kids, hide your children, hide your pets. That's the topic. And seeing a lot of people talk about this. It's all over social media, and even our customers kind of ask about it, particularly if they're in copywriting. You know, there's a little bit of concern about what does this mean for my role as a copywriter, or as a creative. And so we want to talk about it and have that conversation. And hopefully you learn something from this. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Always learn a lot when talking to Eleanor. So I'm excited for you to hear from her as well. So, all right, I'll let Eleanor introduce herself.
Yeah, so my name is Eleanor. I am a graphic designer and I work in marketing here at Lithero. I also like to do some art on the side. I consider myself a creative. And yeah, super excited to talk about my thoughts on AI.
All right, so we have terms here, and I think one of the things I learned, actually it was back in college, was the importance of defining your terms, because you can have a conversation and one person is saying one word and the person's using the exact same word, but they mean different things, right? And so I think it's important to really define what we mean by some of these terms. And you may have your own definition. So if you have a definition for these that doesn't quite line up with ours, then put it in the comments and let us know how you define these things. So I'll start with the AI piece, and I'll have Eleanor define creativity and what that means to her. AI for me is really just any kind of technology that simulates what a human typically does, right? So intelligence, we know, is typically associated with a mind, and we have natural intelligences, right? And that could be anything from something simple like an animal, right? I love dogs, and dogs will certainly have a type of intelligence. And human intelligence is usually what we're talking about, right? Which is more advanced, right? We're the smartest beings on the planet. And AI is artificial intelligence, right? It's not natural, it's not biological in any way, but it simulates what we understand intelligence is to do, right? So things like different domains of object recognition, right? This is a water bottle, right? My ability to look at this and understand that it's a water bottle is something that we typically associate with intelligences. A rock does not look at things and say this is a water bottle, right? You need a mind to kind of recognize things, right? That's object recognition. Natural language processing, the fact that I am talking and the words coming out of my mouth communicate something in Eleanor's mind, right, or in your mind as you're listening to this video. You are processing language, right, understanding language, which is something that's unique to humans, actually. Although we do have some examples of animals seeming to have some kind of symbolic representation at some level, but humans are the ones that have true, written language and can communicate with speech and those kind of things. So those are just two examples, right? Lots of other areas of intelligences, but again, for me, AI just means you have artificially simulated, or in a non-biological way, simulated something that you would typically associate with an intelligence, right? That's it. And you can do that in a whole lot of different ways, a lot of different techniques to do it, but that's the broad category of what I mean when I say AI.
Yeah, and so when it comes to creativity, I think of it as almost this intrinsic trait that every human being is kind of born with. I think you don't have to be an artist to be creative. I think that creativity basically boils down to the ability to generate new ideas from your imagination. And I think that it can be, you can certainly be inspired by other things and still be creative. But at the end of the day, creativity is creating something, right? First of all, there was nothing, then you think it in your brain, you have an idea, and then boom, you've made something new. To me, that's what creativity is.
Cool. And Ellen, it'd be really interesting, when you say creating something new, but it can be inspired by other things. What, as a creative, right?
Yeah.
What are those things that inspire you? Like when you're sitting down to make something, what are you starting with typically?
Yeah, interesting. So I would say some of the things that I look to for inspiration are classical design movements. So like the Bauhaus school or Art Deco are some things that I look at, mid-century modern, all these sort of typical styles that you see. I guess that. And then also I draw inspiration from nature, you know, the way that things naturally are. I think I actually used to be a biology student, so I take a lot of inspiration from the natural way that things have evolved. I find it's really fascinating.
Interesting. Now, I guess, what do you think of this topic, right? So given the definition of AI, given, you know, creativity, I think it's really interesting. I'm going to come back to that, what you said about inspiration, because I think there's some cool, maybe some ways in which AI can lay into that as well. But yeah, what do you think of this question? How does it, you know, where do you land on it?
Yeah, I think, I mean, if you were to ask me, is AI the end of human creativity? I would say absolutely not. I think that there is a lot that humans have to offer that I've yet to see AI be able to do. So for that reason, I'm pretty confident that human creativity isn't going anywhere.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Let me, and I'm gonna not give my own opinion yet, but I kind of understand a bit more. Do you feel like it's threatened? So it's not the end, right?
Yeah.
You think that it feels threatened?
I definitely do. I've seen some colleagues and even myself at times feel a little bit threatened by AI, just in that it can do creative things very fast, right? And one of the issues with, I feel like, the creative field in general is that we've struggled to prove our value over and over again. It's hard to justify the cost of like hiring an illustrator to do your marketing when you can just Google something and use that for free. I think what's threatening about AI is particularly the speed. I think a lot of people that are working with creatives obviously want things to be done as fast as possible, and if you aren't caring so much about the creativity first and you care more about the speed, it is absolutely totally a viable thing for you to say, like, well, I can't afford to hire a creator for this, I'm just going to use AI instead. So in that aspect, I think it is a little bit threatening, just because you know, we can't really compete in terms of like you put in a prompt and you instantly get results, right?
Right.
That's
prompt
not
the
something.
human. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, is part of the challenge that we're thinking about this as versus, right? Because I was thinking there's, you know, NASA, right? As an example, there used to be jobs that was just doing computation.
Totally.
And literally people just doing math, right? To calculate, you know, different things so that the rockets would go in the right place, right?
Yeah.
And those jobs don't exist anymore. And I wonder to what extent there might be some parts of a creative role that goes away, but those people were super smart and super valuable, and they're now doing other things, right? So I'm just kind of wondering, are we thinking about it as, and also the people who did the manual computation now are using computers to do computation, and then they're integrating that computation part into their other roles. I'm wondering if there's an element in which creatives will still be doing creative work, but it might look different, right? That there are parts of it that will be you know, if the creative is still driving the process, done by the machine, but maybe, you know, you're looking at options, right? I know when you all work together, you're often saying, hey, I want to build out this new concept, and you'll say, hey, here are 3 different concepts, 3 different options. We did this with Lara 6, or we have different ways of doing even things like the login page, right? And you had like different approaches and options. I'm wondering, is that the future, where it's sort of maybe the machine's doing some of those options and then you're narrowing it down? I'm just kind of wondering, what does this look like?
It's interesting. So I think in my experience using AI, I've used ChatGPT a little bit. I've used the like generative feature in Photoshop a little bit. And I think the uses that I can see are for honestly the same uses that we use AI here, for basic tasks that are annoying to do and time consuming. Like, for example, if you have a PNG and you need to make the background transparent, it would be super cool if you could just click a button and have an AI do that, versus sitting in Photoshop masking it out yourself with a pen tool. There's just not, it's not necessary to do that anymore. And in terms of functions like that, I don't feel threatened at all, because that's not like, it's not like there are people whose job, like you said, his job is only to mask out images. But Yeah, I think definitely parts of AI can be helpful. I think the most helpful thing to use it for as a creative is just like a starting point. If you have no idea where to start,
right.
throw something in a ChatGPT and get a few options, and then use those as the starting off point to then create something totally new. I think if you're just relying on the output of AI itself, you might not always get high quality results.
Interesting. That's fascinating. Yeah, you know, it's interesting as an engineer thinking about sort of what we're building, right? Like we have that conversation even with our head of AI innovation about sort of where are we going? You know, what is it, particularly given our core values? One of them is people. You know, what does it mean to be an AI company building something that might, you know, affect someone's job? Like I even think about, you know, the process that Lara really sits in, which is the life sciences marketing process. And there are elements of it that are costly because human beings are touching it.
Yeah.
And as Lara gets more advanced, I could see a lot of those roles changing and the cost coming out. But cost, I mean, we talked about this in the home concept, if you're taking cost out, you probably are affecting someone's paycheck at some point, right? So it's sort of like,
no way around it.
There's no way around it. Like that's just, you know, cost means someone's getting money, right? And if you're lowering costs, and somebody is getting less money, which means there's a job that's probably going to be affected at some point. So it's a really interesting, you know, kind of tension between pushing AI as far as it will go, while also thinking about, well, what is the human impact of this, and you know, what's the model? I think, you know, to give my answer to the question, I totally agree with you. I don't think it's the end of human creativity at all. I do think it's a tool. That's how I think about it, that it's a tool. We were talking earlier about it helps to know what AI is, right? Like we sometimes, and a lot of this is hype, right? The feeling that AI is, like I heard someone describe it, you know, are we dealing with, is it conscious, right? Is it sort of, you know, the movie, there are all these movies. There's Terminator, right? As an example, right? The AI comes alive and tries to take over humanity. I talk with my kids about all the time. The robots are going to take over. It's kind of a running theme. And I don't think that's true. I think that a lot of that's based on not really understanding what AI is. And humans are really good at anthropomorphizing. Like my kids do this. Like we have a robot vacuum. Which is, they've been around forever, and my kids named it. Right?
Oh yeah, same. And we also named it.
You named it, you named the vacuum. Like why do that, right? We know it's a machine. Right?
I know,
we know. But we have this element with us inside of us that sort of we want to connect, we want to relate, we anthropomorphize things. And so my kids named our vacuum Brian, and so they'll like walk through the room like, "Hi, Brian," you know, as it's vacuuming the dining room, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And so I think we do that to machines generally,
right? And
I think AI, because it's simulating what kind of things that we do, right? A vacuum doesn't. It's like clearly I'm not, you know. But it's closer to us. And I think it feels even more threatening because it is like, oh my gosh, like this does feel like it could be another me. And I think that's part of why it's threatening about it. But I think for me, just like, you know, if I can show my kids, hey, look, this vacuum is just, it's not a pet dog, right? my toddler likes to go by and pet the vacuum. There's like, you know, it's plastic.
Right, there's a servo.
It's like, it's you know, gears, like, you know, understanding what it is. Because as a toddler, she's like, I don't know what that is. It looks like an animal that is moving around, right? But for me, knowing what it is helps me understand and be able to explain it to her. And I think similarly with AI, most people don't know what's under the hood. Right? And so they see the output, they see what it does, and it looks like a human. It looks like what a human would create. It feels like, oh my gosh, this feels like I'm dealing with a super intelligence, right?
Absolutely, especially like the conversational AI. Like it really seems like it's another living person talking to you.
Yeah, it does. And what's really fascinating to me and helpful, I think, kind of being behind the scenes a bit, right, and then being able to see even the code of how our machine learning models work, is that at the end of the day, it's computation, right? And that's really interesting that there is a way that we figured out based on human knowledge, because AI wouldn't exist if we first hadn't digitized all of human knowledge, essentially, right? If we didn't have that, there's no way we could have built AI. So step one was just the internet, right? And digitizing things, and then figuring out that we could not only do that, but also describe it mathematically. That we can mathematically describe, even when you look at this sentence here, right? We can mathematically describe how these relate to one another, right? And the fact that we can do that, right? First we have all this knowledge, and then we can mathematically describe that knowledge in a way how they relate to one another. And then we can then find patterns in that knowledge and then manipulate that and do calculations. And so it's like all AI is doing math really fast. Right? In like very complex ways, but it's predicting what the next thing to say is, right? The next piece of a word to even use.
Completely. And I think part of that is, since AI is only based on things it's ever seen before, right? Like there's no, one of the reasons that I feel like I'm not threatened by AI to replace human creativity is that AI never comes up with an organic idea out of nowhere, right? Everything in AI is telling you is statistically, decided based on, past sentences, patterns that have been seen before. So for that reason, I don't really feel, I think a big part of creativity is picking up on patterns and being inspired by things, but I think at the end of the day, human creativity as more of you're really generating new ideas yourself, as opposed to just plugging in something and taking the echo chamber sort of result that you get from only feeding it known information.
You know what's really interesting? I was thinking about this the other day in terms of the edge cases, right? So you think about, I'm a big fan of Einstein, like my favorite scientist probably ever, and what he did as a patent clerk, right, is he came up with a new way of thinking about the universe that just didn't exist before, right? There wasn't a lot of inspiration, to use your words earlier, for him to build his concepts on. And that I think is sort of the leading edge of creativity, right? When there's not really, in fact, I make it even worse, where the ideas are counterintuitive, right? Where it might even contradict the inspiration that you have to work with. Right? Like that's truly, really creative. And so that kind of thing, I don't think AI will ever get there, because I'm not sure how you would necessarily compute that, because if you're building on patterns, you're building on kind of rules or understanding how the way you think the world works, and particularly if the training data is really human understanding of X topic. If human understanding of X topic is wrong, right, as was our model of the way the universe worked, right? Like we used to think the universe was sort of steady state, right? Einstein was like, no, it was a singularity that started it all, right?
That's a whole revolves around the Earth.
Right, there's a whole different way of thinking about something. I think that, and we even see this with AI bias, right? People talk about AI bias. Why is there AI bias? Because there's bias in the data, right? There's bias in the way that we've operated it, and we've kind of instantiated that into the AI, and we then have to try to correct for it. So Dr. Morton always says, you're only as good as your training data, right? That's your only training data.
Absolutely.
So I think the creative tasks that I think I don't think see AI ever being able to do are kind of like Einstein class, right? The things where it's like, I am doing something that is counterintuitive, that has very little working material to work with. And to your point, I think the things where I could see, kind of like the NASA example, where it's like, we're going to use machines for this. It's more the more routine things. Now, what I'm concerned about is, do we? And I'd love your thoughts on this. I think in order to, is it true that you don't get to the Einstein class level creativity where you're doing something completely new without first doing the basics, right? Because I know in your design experience, like you didn't start off doing the stuff you do now, right? That there's a progression of, hey, let's just learn color theory, right? And we talked about that. I'm always like, Eleanor, which color should I use for this? Okay, based on this, use that, right? But you have to start off with the basics, right? And then get familiar with that, and then you build up to, I'm doing something completely novel, right? Like you made a reference to design movements. I don't even know what those are. Right? So you have all that background, right? So I'm kind of curious as to your thoughts of if AI is really being used to do sort of the basic stuff. Are we kind of not giving people the experience, right, so they can get to being Einstein?
It's interesting. So I feel like, at least in my experience going to design school, you start off, just like you said, with the very, very basics. You start off learning perspective, you're not figuring out the mathematical properties of perspective on your own. You're learning it from, the great masters of ancient Greece and everything like that. So I think it is absolutely very necessary to have an understanding of the basics where you can kind of draw upon that well of knowledge to then go ahead and synthesize something new. Because a lot of things that are new can also be described as kind of an amalgamation of a bunch of different areas being brought together.
In a new way.
Exactly, in a new way. And I just think that AI can be helpful to, I guess, just create like a jumping off point for something new, but I don't think that AI has the ability to fully, obviously, like you said, and we don't have the technological capabilities of having AI just synthesize something completely new out of the blue.
Without a prompt.
Without a prompt. Of course.
I mean that would be sort of if, right? And this is kind of interesting. I think that the true test of intelligence, like not just simulating intelligence, like being innately intelligent, maybe even, I won't use the A word, I won't say alive, right? But sort of really, this is different, would be if we had a machine come up with something without being prompted. Right? Because I think about even my kids, I have 4, and what's really fascinating and interesting about them is they surprise me all the time, right? Like they don't require me to sort of give them something to start with, right? They are themselves self-initiating, right? And I think we that I almost wonder is sort of maybe a part of the missing definition of true intelligence, right? That it self-initiates in some way, whereas at least our current understanding of our current models or approaches for AI, we have to give it something, right? There has to be something that starts off. So that's interesting to me.
I feel like another thing that separates like the human creativity from the AI is that as humans, we're constantly observing, right? We're constantly processing information about our outside world and using that information to create a reality that we believe in. And AI doesn't really do that, right? It's kind of just a computer that sits there. It's not really actively. It waits. It's not really actively like observing anything, or it doesn't sit there and think on its own, right? But as people, we know we're always brains are always going. We're always thinking of something. We always have an internal monologue going on. I think that that's something that AI will never have. I hope.
It's interesting because I remember talking about this with Dr. Morton, and one of the things that he said to me, he was like, well, does it need to, right? And that was really interesting because I think we talked about anthropomorphizing earlier, and one of the things that he pointed out to me was we have to be careful of assuming that artificial intelligence has to work like us. Like that's the other part of it is we have this internal monologue, we have this kind of self-initiating component, and the point he was making was it may not need to achieve what we are in order to be useful, right? So there's a distinction between consciousness, true intelligence, and usefulness, right? Lara is not alive, right? We know that
Right,
it's
yeah.
not. It's just doing these really interesting analysis of documents, and it doesn't understand it, right? It doesn't truly say
yeah.
I understand this content, right?
Totally.
In a sort of that you and I would understand it. Even how do we define understanding? But we can see what it's doing to some extent, right? That it's making these probabilities and those kind of things, right? But it doesn't have to his point is it doesn't have to understand in order to still be useful to a human being. And so I think there's that element of, as we talk about artificial intelligence, it doesn't need to be truly creative necessarily. It doesn't need to self-initiate. I think those things are helpful when we think about what's the difference between humans and AI. I think those are really helpful. But I think there is still a lot of use, right? Just from the math,
Yeah.
And math has always been helpful.
Right? So I think it is kind of interesting how the tasks that AI is now doing are tasks that, honestly, why are we automating them?
Oh, really? That's interesting.
I think.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, it seems kind of, I don't know, humans are born to create. Humans love creating new things and making something new. And I think some things that I would like to be automated in my life are the laundry, doing the dishes. I don't want AI to design for me. I like to design. I want AI to do the stuff that I don't like doing.
Okay, all right. Okay, interesting. Yeah, the boring stuff.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. But I think it's sort of we can't keep it in the box in a sense, right? If we wanted to be able to do the boring stuff, it almost necessarily has to be doing more complicated things. But I think also your point is, and this is something I always like to point out to people, at the end of the day, we control how we use it.
Yeah.
Right? Even if a machine has the capability to do X task, doesn't mean you have to use it for X task. I just got a new laptop, right? And my laptop is all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Half of these functionalities, I don't even need that, right? I don't need it to do these things or different software programs that are installed on it from the manufacturer.
Yeah.
So I think routinely we have tech, or my phone. I've had an iPhone since iPhones came out, and the other day my wife was like, "Oh, did you know you can do this with it?" I was like, "Oh, really?" I didn't know.
Yeah.
So there's that element of, just because a machine does certain things doesn't mean that's how we use it necessarily. Even as a software company, we're not ever planning to sort of replace you with ChatGPT. That doesn't doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
Now we want to use AI and get faster and use it for all these kind of things, right? But
absolutely.
I think at the end of the day, as humans, we have to decide what kind of world we want, right? And what kind of society we want, and how we're going to use these technologies, right? So even if it has X capability, how do we do that, right? Which is why we talked about home and kind of human-owned AI-assisted model and that kind of thing. At the end of the day, it's up to us, right? In terms of what we want to do.
Completely.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts?
I think AI can seem very threatening, but once you understand that it's kind of all math all the way down, it's a little bit less threatening. I think that humans, at least for now, definitely have the edge over AI-generated copy and art and images and stuff like that. I think I can certainly tell if sometimes I see something and I'm like, an AI wrote that. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, the best way to utilize AI going forward is, like you said, as a tool. Use it for things that you don't want to do by hand, but need to get done.
Yeah, it can make your life easier.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, Eleanor.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for watching. A fascinating conversation. Hopefully you learned something. And if you want to learn more about us and what we're doing, you can email us, hello@livedover.com. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.